Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, something that's got a lot of people talking right now is a tweet from Mike Kopinger that reads, before this narrative that no one will face Luis Ortiz goes any further, let's not forget
What?
Eddie Hearn offered Ortiz the Anthony Joshua fight in June. Ortiz turned down the fight with a promise from PBC he'd fight Deontay Wilder in the fall.
We know.
Now, Ortiz will earn in excess of $7 million. $7 million, ladies and gentlemen. I struggle to believe that. I really do. And I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say, oh, of course you do. You hate the PBC. You don't like Deontay Wilder. You don't believe anything they say. But you know what? You can think that. You can feel free to disagree. At the end of the day, the numbers and the reports that have been put up in the past are the main reason that I struggle to believe Luis Ortiz will walk away from that fight in excess of $7 million. I struggle to believe that. Why do I struggle to believe that?
Why?
$7 million, in excess of $7 million for a pay-per-view that boxing insiders themselves, people in the business,
People in the now.
believe isn't even going to do the same numbers as Wilder versus Fury's pay-per-view. What kind of numbers did that pay-per-view do? That pay-per-view did 325,000 pay-per-views. And the guaranteed purses for the fighters in that pay-per-view weren't $7 million. You know, Wilder didn't get $7 million guaranteed, and neither did Fury. Wilder got 4, Fury got 3. Those were their guaranteed purses. And whatever other money aside from the guarantee, whatever other money they made from that fight would have been from the upside.
Not the network.
That's just it. The upside wasn't that much.
75,000.
The break-even point for that pay-per-view, as you all might already know, was 250,000 buys. The pay-per-view itself only did 325,000 buys. So the upside for that thing, it's not that much.
75,000.
You're looking at an upside of about, what, 75,000 buys, roughly? 75,000 buys, which comes out to, at $75 a buy, $5.6 million. It's not that big an upside when you've got to split it evenly 2 ways. And that was the upside for that pay-per-view. You look over at this thing, and what Mike Kopinger's alleging, and he's basically saying that, what, Ortiz is going to make close to $10 million from a pay-per-view that boxing insiders themselves don't even think is going to do the same numbers as Wilder versus Fury. I struggle to believe that.
$7 million.
Excess of $7 million. What are you telling me? That Fox guaranteed Luis Ortiz $7 million? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I don't get it. Are we talking about $7 million guaranteed with a pay-per-view upside? Or are we talking about $7 million with the guarantee and the upside? A total of $7 million. What are we really talking about? Let's look at this thing. I struggle to believe that Fox guaranteed Luis Ortiz $7 million to participate in this pay-per-view. I struggle to believe that. And, you know, the main reason, one of the main reasons, is because they didn't even guarantee Errol Spence $7 million for this past weekend's fight. They didn't. The guaranteed purses for that fight was $2 million for Errol and $2 million for Sean. And, you know, while Sean's not necessarily a huge name, you know, a big marquee guy, Errol's got a buzz going. You know, Errol's been on pay-per-view before, unlike Luis Ortiz. Errol headlines his own events, unlike Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz is an undercard fighter. That's what he's been doing since he fought Wilder. He's an undercard guy. I mean, that's basically what he is. He's an undercard fighter. And you're telling me that Fox guaranteed an undercard fighter $7 million, where they only guaranteed Errol, who's been on pay-per-view before and headlines his own events, they only gave Errol $2 million guaranteed, with the rest of the proceeds coming directly from the fans' pockets, whatever the upside of the pay-per-view was. That's where he would have made the rest of his money, from the upside. Not the network guaranteeing him an amount, so much as the upside of the pay-per-view once the buys start to come in, once it exceeds the break-even point. They only guaranteed Errol $2 million, but you're telling me that Fox guaranteed Luis Ortiz, who's an undercard fighter, they guaranteed him $7?
Damn it.
And he's supposed to make in excess of that for a pay-per-view that boxing insiders don't even think is going to do the same numbers as Wilder versus Fury. Yeah, I struggle to believe that. I'm thinking that Mike Kopinger's numbers, they're a little off, or whoever's giving him these numbers, whoever his source is and where this information is coming from. Because you got to think about this. You really got to sit down. You got to think about this, okay? You're telling people that Fox is giving this guy what? $7 million guaranteed. Is that what you're telling me? They're giving Ortiz that. Okay, so what are they giving Wilder? We know what Wilder's price tag is looking like these days. Something to the tune of maybe
Around there.
12 million, something around there, because that's more or less what Showtime put up for the Brazil fight. That's what they gave him. That was the incentivized offer that they gave Wilder to keep him and keep that fight on their side of the street. It was something to the tune of $9 to $12 million, maybe a little more. Okay? So you're giving what? You're giving Ortiz $7 million, and you're giving Wilder about $12 million.
What?
Which comes out to roughly $19 million. $19 million, this thing. For a fight that boxing insiders don't even think is going to do the same numbers as Wilder versus Fury. 325,000 buys. You're telling me that Fox invested that much money, guaranteed, in these two guys in a pay-per-view, for a pay-per-view, that nobody was asking for, not that many people are excited about, and many boxing insiders don't even think is going to match Wilder's last pay-per-view numbers. You're telling me they put up that much money? I struggle to believe that because I just saw Fox guarantee Errol Spence a meager $2 million. I mean, what? You're telling me that Fox is going to throw money away?
Fuck it.
They're down to lose their money. They don't care about getting a return.
Fuck
they
it.
don't care about breaking even.
Fuck
they
it.
just want to make sure that they give these guys this money. That's what you're telling me? I'm sorry, I don't believe that. That's not how business works, especially in this business. No, that makes absolutely no sense. And you know what I'll tell you? I'll tell you that this is creating a situation to where I can't simply believe the information. I can't qualify it. I can't take it at face value just because it's coming from you. You being Mike Kopinger. That's the situation that this is creating because this is inconsistent with most every other number reported in recent memory in regards to these two fighters. It's just too inconsistent. It almost seems embellished, fabricated. That's what it looks like. It's creating a very similar situation to my sentiments in regards to Thomas Hauser. That, you know what, you can write an article about some shit, but I'm not going to believe it just because it's coming from you. I'm going to need you to cite some sources. You know, I displayed to you two articles from Thomas Hauser. The one regarding the Dillian White situation and how he cited no sources at all.
None.
Anywhere in that article. And yet another article discussing the Wilder-Brazil situation and DAZN situation where he cited several sources. One of them being Keith Idek, several other articles covering several bits and pieces of information. In one article, you're citing sources, and in the other article, you're not citing any sources. The situation with Mike Kopinger is creating a situation like that to where, okay, I'm going to need some sources before I can actually believe what you're saying, because I'm not going to believe it just because you're saying it. You know, this has got to be coming from somewhere, and depending on where that somewhere is, I may or may not believe what you're reporting. That's the situation that this is creating. And you know, I don't see any sources cited in what he's saying. You know, sources. Okay, who are they? Sources could be the guy at the coffee shop, the guy at the bodega, you know, the bus driver. Fucking sources. What are you talking about? These numbers are not consistent with anything we've seen so far in regards to Wilder, in regards to Ortiz, in regards to what Fox is guaranteeing these fighters. It's not consistent with what people feel about this pay-per-view as to how well it may or may not do. None of this is consistent with any of the information leading up to this point. And this report and these numbers, they seem almost embellished. They seem almost fabricated. And I'll give you another example of what I'm talking about. You know, a couple of days ago, I think it was Monday. It was Monday. You know, Mike Kopinger, he released another tweet. A set of numbers in regards to Errol Spence and Sean Porter's pay-per-view this past weekend. And almost immediately, I thought to myself, pay-per-view numbers on a Monday?
Huh?
Hold on a second. You know, when have pay-per-view numbers ever come out that fast? I mean, that was fast. Fight goes down on Saturday.
Yeah.
Pay-per-view numbers come out on Monday. Where normally takes about a week, sometimes 2 weeks, for a set of numbers to come out from a verifiable and credible source.
Yeah.
Where it normally takes, you know, at least a couple of days. You know, you had Mike 2 days after the fight saying this thing, you know, it's tracking at 300,000 and it may top off at 350,000. And immediately I thought to myself, well, hold on a second. You know, with the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder pay-per-view, the reports that were circulating around that time, they said that, you know, it's going to take 3 months to crunch all the numbers, but the pay-per-view itself should top out at 325,000 buys. Now, that report in and of itself, that didn't come out anywhere near as fast as this did. You know, this report, or, you know, this tweet, I should say.
Yeah.
From Mike Kopinger and whoever his source is, this came out relatively fast compared to that. And in that Wilder versus Fury report, you know, talking about what the pay-per-view numbers were going to be, that they said, you know, 3 months should top off at 325,000 buys. That indicates that at the time the report was made, it wasn't actually there yet. Whereas, you know, Here with Mike Copinger, 2 days after the fight, you're tracking it at 300,000 already. Really, it took them 3 months to track it at 325,000, but here in 2 days, you're telling me it's tracking at 300,000 or 350,000. 350,000? That's more than Wilder versus Fury. And what happens? What happens that makes this a bit hard to believe? A couple of days later, yet another report from Boxing Scene comes out that puts the number for Porter versus Spence at 275,000 pay-per-view buys. Not 300,000, not 350,000, 275,000.
There's a discrepancy there.
I mean, that's a difference of about 75,000 pay-per-view buys. And, 75,000 times $75, per pay-per-view. You're looking at about $5.6 million, okay? It's a bit of a sizable difference if your numbers are off. If somebody's fudging the numbers, I'd say, yeah, that's a significant, decent-sized fudge. You got Boxing Scene saying per several sources, that the numbers, it's tracking at 275, whereas you're tracking it at anywhere from 300 to 350,000.
You're rounding up.
350,000. 75, that's a difference of 75,000 pay-per-view buys. That's a bit of it's a decent-sized difference, I'd say.
You're rounding up.
There is a difference between 375,000 and 275,000. There is a difference.
You're rounding up.
And this is what I'm talking about, that Mike Copinger's tweets, his reports, as of late, they're very questionable, that you can't quite take it at face value, because we all know that while the fight itself was a fantastic fight, once it played out, leading up to it, everyone was fully aware that, Sean Porter, God bless him, he's an amazing athlete, a fantastic fighter. He lays it all out in the ring in there, but at the end of the day, he doesn't even have the following that Spence has. He doesn't even have the following that Mikey Garcia has. And the perception of the pay-per-view, the perception of it is that it would likely do under what the Mikey Garcia pay-per-view did. And that pay-per-view was 360 to 330,000 buys? The latest set of numbers in regards to that pay-per-view put it at 330,000 buys. Not 360 like they were talking about months ago. Latest set of numbers was 330 for Spence versus Garcia. You got Mike Copinger saying, well, this Spence Porter pay-per-view did 350. And I don't know that I can qualify that, because there's yet another report floating around saying it did 275,000. Essentially what I'm getting at is there's something fishy going on with Mike Copinger, and either it's him or his sources, but there's definitely something going on there to where it's getting hard to take the information at face value.
What if somebody out there is buying journalists? What if boxing outfits out there are incentivizing offers to journalists to tell stories a certain way, that when numbers are reported, they're being fudged, they're being rounded up, they're trying to perpetuate a falsehood to the boxing community at large as to...
What the hell is going on?
Gaslight the boxing community, fool them. Try to convince them of your narrative, your version of a story. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, come on. It's not that deep. Why would they have to do all that? Well, you're trying to convince a lot of people to pay a sizable amount of money for a fight that they weren't asking for. You want people to buy this Wilder versus Ortiz fight. But in order for there to be any appeal in that fight, Ortiz has got to stay a boogeyman. Oh, he's the boogeyman that nobody wants to fight. Oh, nobody wants to fight him. That's why they offered him $7 million. That's many times over what he made fighting Wilder. They offered him $7 million and he walked away from that because apparently he's too good for that. So you turn around and you cook up a story to where, he's going to make that same amount fighting Wilder. So he's still the boogeyman, and he did the right thing. I mean, what this could be is somebody over there at the PBC giving a false representation of things to save face. Or it could be that somebody over there at the PBC may be giving Mike Copinger a cash incentive to tell the story a certain way. It's any variety of things, but the information itself, at minimum, what you can deduce is that you can't take this at face value, that Luis Ortiz is going to make $7 million for this fight.
Yeah, right.
I mean, think about it. Really think about it. What's the selling point for Wilder versus Ortiz 2? Was there actually a demand for a rematch? You know the answer.
No.
No. There wasn't a demand for that fight. But in order for there to be any kind of intrigue, any kind of enthusiasm, any kind of excitement, Ortiz has got to stay the boogeyman, the quote-unquote boogeyman that Wilder beat already. We saw this fight. We got it. It was a good fight, but it's done. There wasn't any need for a rematch, yet you guys so chose to make it. You need to sell it. In order to sell it, he's got to be a boogeyman. Well, he doesn't seem like a boogeyman when he's walking away from $7 million. So what do? You tell everybody, he's going to make $7 million for this fight. He's going to make that. So, yeah, he's still the boogeyman. You look at the Spence shit. They want to tell you that Spence is a pay-per-view star. They want to convince you that that's what he is. But it's hard to convince people of that when your most recent pay-per-view with a guy at your own weight likely brought in less numbers than your last pay-per-view with a guy from 135 that jumped up 2 weight classes. It gives people the impression that, Spence, he's not really a pay-per-view star. Good numbers, solid numbers, and the Porter fight was a great fight. But you telling me he's a pay-per-view star? Nah, not quite. So what do? You fudge the numbers. You embellish them just a little bit. You don't run around saying, yeah, he sold 500,000 pay-per-views or he sold 1 million pay-per-views. No, you can't do that and get away with it. It's too big a lie. So you tell a small lie, a little white lie, where it may have only actually done 275,000. You add an additional 75,000. You say, oh, well, it's actually tracking at around 300,000, and it might top off. It might, keywords like might and probably and maybe and this, that, and the other. This kind of stuff.
Kind of shit.
You say this stuff, you say, oh, it might top off at 350,000. That's a guesstimate. I mean, if you're observant, if you're perceptive, that's what that is. That's a guesstimate. But your guesstimate, as opposed to someone else's, is way up there at 350, whereas, what the other guys are reporting is 275,000. Where'd you get that number? Why can't you verify it? Why does there have to be such a cloak and dagger situation when it comes to some simple fucking pay-per-view buys? We all know why. People want to save face. You don't want to appear as weak in the eyes of your competitors. So you don't wear your heart on your sleeve. You don't really tell the truth. What you want to do is perpetuate a false representation of what's going on. Because here you are. You're trying to sell Spence as some kind of a pay-per-view star. And I'm not saying that he might not. I'm not saying that he won't get there at some point. Maybe he does. But this is what you guys are saying right now. And we're talking about right now. Well, right now, it seems, based on the numbers that are floating around, this guy's not a pay-per-view star. No, not yet. You want to assert him as that, but that's not what he is, because his last pay-per-view reportedly did more numbers than this pay-per-view. So if he was a pay-per-view star, the trend would be going up, not down. But he, like many other fighters in today's pay-per-view market, you need a dance partner. There has to be a demand. There's no two ways about it. There has to be a demand for you to put on a fight on pay-per-view and ask people to pay $75 to see it. There has to be a demand. And in Spence's last 2 pay-per-views, the last fight being great, it was a great fight. But was there a demand for that? No, the demand lies with Terrence Crawford, and y'all don't want to let him fight that guy yet. That's what's going on. So you want to convince people of something else. Oh, Spence is a star. He's the A-side. He gets to call the shots. Because you don't want people assigning blame to him as to why the fight they actually want to see is the one you don't want to make. You want it to seem like he's calling the shots. That's what's going on. Look, I look at these reports, I look at the inconsistencies, and these are the only inferences that I can make. That there's something funny about what's being reported. There's something funny about whoever Mike Kopinger's sources is in regards to these stories. Because if we look at what's been floating around so far, what he's saying doesn't make a lot of sense. So either it's him or his sources that are at fault, that are trying to misrepresent what's going on.